Hello, everybody. My name is Carlos Siqueira. I'm a global product evangelist at Elements Clouds, also a Salesforce MVP, and I'm very happy, very proud to be invited for the very first PAC Dream events. Dream events are created by the community for the community, so it's extremely important that you support your community. So this is the beauty of Ohana. So today we're going to be talking about Salesforce configuration knowledge. What is Salesforce configuration knowledge? A lot of times, and we are doing development or we're doing gathering requirements. So even after we get the requirements, we always think, what's the consequences of me doing a change on my system? Okay, so when you're talking to your users, you gather requirements. You need to make sure that you get the proper requirements. You need to make sure that you validate those requirements. Later on, when you validate them, you have to give your developers, that means the proper tools to make sure that they can speed up the process. And you have to take in consideration as well, risk. What if I change a field? What if I change an APAC class? So Salesforce configuration knowledge is pretty much a best practice that you can see in there, and as well there's a products out there that you can look into that. So today's talk is pretty much about how you can use the concept of Salesforce configuration knowledge to expedite your development, your process, and of course, you know, your DevOps. That's something that everybody needs to know about it. Okay. So innovate faster with less risk. Salesforce is accelerating digital transformation. Salesforce requires enterprise-scale business and impact analysis tools for implementation success. We say Salesforce at the scale dilemma. This is done by Forrester Institute research. So they pretty much came up with this conclusion here. So a connected view of all configuration knowledge allows impact analysis, which reduces change risk and accelerates time to value. So that's pretty much what I mentioned before. When you're doing your gathering, first 3 points to think about it is first is to do your gathering your requirements. Okay, validate they are correct. Second is make sure that you translate those requirements in user stories or specs that your developer, that means they can do that properly. Write the code, change objects and things like that, either whether it's in a programmatic way or in a declarative way. And that's pretty much accelerates your time to value. So you have a requirement done in 1 day and you can shrink the time that it takes for the developers, that means to create something and put that in production, of course, with doing the proper tests. We say that shift left. Early on your process, you identify all those issues, you do several tests, it's like a measure twice, cut only once. And the third point in there is you accelerate innovation and reduce risk. You have to do a risk assessment. If I add this new field, what are the consequences? Where in my system that field is going to be used? If I remove that field, or if I change that field or object, what the Apex class that gets affected by that? What's the Lightning Web components that get affected by that? What's the visual force, report dashboards, and so forth? So this is what you have done, okay? Built on the past content. When you don't have, is without a configuration knowledge, what's happened? You have a long release cycles. You ended up having tech debt is increased, and you have a silo documentation. Things are pretty much isolated. Once you adopt configuration knowledge, what happened? Risk-based business analyst is the shift left. Is what I mentioned before. Early on, you detect this risk. Early on, you make sure that you have a proper requirements so that you can expedite your development. Better data dictionary and org impact analysis, connected and aggregated documentation. So you no longer have this siloed here, information here, information over there. So you have, when you say connect and aggregate documentation, is a centralized repository where all your developers, that means business analysts, the scrum masters, business owners, so forth, everybody has access to that information. We reduce org discovery from 2 weeks to 3 days. think about it, 2 weeks is pretty much 14 days. Let's not count the weekends. Let's count just weekdays. We talk 10 days here. And you reduce that to 3 days by adopting a proper configuration knowledge, practicing. The other things here, unlock feature value. Okay, dozens, if not hundreds of hours saved in the last 3 months. That's a testimonial by another Salesforce product owner here. So that's, you have to emphasize how important it is for you to consider configuring this knowledge way before you do DevOps. DevOps is great. You have to consider DevOps, but before you do that, you need to look into configuration knowledge as on a daily basis, every time that you're going to do something in your org. What if scenarios? What's the impact? How many people is going to be impacted? What's the metadata that's going to be impacted? Am I going to introduce bugs? Am I going to break the system? So configuration knowledge accelerates time to value. Engaged users drive out to better requirements and identify quick wins. Early impact analysis ensure that issues are caught early and agility increases. That's what I mentioned about shift left. Early on your process, you identify any issues, you validate any issues, you test, you retest. Stakeholders collaborations across configuration knowledge increases agility. Platform owners, business analysts, admins, developers, and end users, as I mentioned before, is like a collaboration where you unify, you bring all the team members to you on your organization, you bring that to an environment where they can collaborate and they can all benefit from that. So 80% is pretty much what we have seen. That's 80% of the time you accelerate development and reduce rework, because as I said, measure twice, cut once, revalidate your requirements there. Reduce impact analysis effort by 50%. You cut your impact analysis in 50%. Eliminate waste with the business analysts. You cut that in 25%. So every time that you can reduce time, okay, and you improve quality, you again, with people talk ROI, the return of investment. And we are living the digital transformation age where people want things done fast, more frequently, with the quality, without introducing bugs in your production. So that's pretty much, you know, as I cannot emphasize enough, configuration knowledge is pretty much the basis for your day-to-day activities, you know, not just in Salesforce, but any IT related, okay? To use a good software configuration knowledge, you need to make sure that you can have your metadata dictionaries. I mean, you have to see that this is available not just on Salesforce, but in other environments. And the beauty, you know, to have a proper configuration knowledge is that you have a nightly metadata sync, meaning if you have done changes in your org on a daily basis today, okay, next morning when you go in there, that reflects in your org. Automated documentation. It's very important that every time that you do something in the system, you document yourself. But what if you forget? We are human beings, okay? We make mistakes, we forget things. So automated documentation is a great feature in there that makes sure that whenever you change something in the system, it auto-documents. You see the dependency analysis. Again, if I change something, what are the consequences throughout my organization? So dependency analysis is very important. It's a change impact analysis as well, because you can see where that metadata is spread around your system, okay? Change tracking. If you change something today, either on an object, on a report, on a dashboard, or Apex, whatever you have changed your metadata, the system, the configuration knowledge must to make sure that it keep this change in tracks. And of course, you have a notification the next morning. After all these things, if you made any change, next morning you get a notification that something has changed in your org, and of course you got to do reporting there. Reporting is good for auditing as well. Oh, somebody changed something on a screen on Apex class 3 weeks ago or over the weekend. So it's always good to have the reporting there. Integration with the other tools. I mean, when you talk about DevOps, it's very important that you talk with the tools like Jira, okay, is your ALM tool. And now with Slack, you improve a lot of collaboration. So you must look into a configuration knowledge tool or process that allow you to do those integrations as well. So where you create your user stories in Jira and they get translated in the configuration knowledge, or you go to a configuration knowledge product and you send this change the user stories to the Jira as well. It must be a bi-directional relationship in there. And of course, with collaboration with Slack, we have to scratch the surface of Slack. Slack is a game changer, and you should consider integration with Slack as well because it improves a lot of collaboration. So what do we do here? What's the content? So the business analyst contents, you allow feedback. You might be using a field and you are end user and say, you know what, this screen here really doesn't look good to me. So do you have a way to provide feedback? Yes, a good configuration knowledge should allow you to instantly in real time to gather feedback. If you say, hey, this field here is on the left side of my screen, but it should be on the right side. So you immediately can right click in there and be able to put a feedback. You should be able to enter requirements as well, because that's how you refine your process. You as an end user is empowered to enter and make suggestions. So those suggestions, they becomes requirements that you later on, they can become user stories, and then you can refine, you can improve your process. Business process maps. Very important. You have the knowledge over here. If you are sick, take a couple weeks vacation, or if you just quit your job, where's the knowledge? You got to map all the business process maps here so that you make sure that the knowledge is stay in-house, inside your org, right? Entity relationship diagrams, very important. How you understand how your objects work, how your process works. So it's very important to look into the entity relationship diagrams. User stories. I mean, user stories are agile concepts that, regardless of your platform, you should always consider, you're doing user stories that you gather your requirements from the users, and you pretty much create your user stories that becomes pretty much almost the specs for what your developers and your admins is going to work from. Releases and versioning is very important that you keep that information. Oh, I just change a report, I just change an app, I just change whatever you have changed in there. It's very important that you keep the release and versioning control to see exactly who did what and when. Compliance models, depending on the industry that you work, you might have several different compliance requirements in there. Audits, if you work for an insurance company, if you work for a fintech, so compliance is very important as well. Training records, so this allows you to get onboarding new people. You get a new people starting in your company, they don't know much about your system, so configuration knowledge, once again, it comes handy. And of course, you have an in-app help. In-app, there's a feature for Salesforce that's it's called an in-app. I just forgot here right now, but it's in-app help or in-app training or something like that. Well, with a proper configuration knowledge, should incorporate that feature as well that allow you to create screens or pop-ups that guide you step by step, what you need to do in order to learn your system is in there. And metadata dictionaries, as I mentioned here, nightly metadata sync, everything that you have done during the day, overnight, you get that updated. Automated documentation, as always, dependency analysis, change impact analysis, notifications and reports. These are all important things that you need on in your metadata. Oh, I just remember, this is in-app guidance. Okay, so that's something that's you should take advantage of a native Salesforce in-app guidance. So in-app help here, it pretty much help you onboarding or even on a daily basis, expedite your process of learning your system. And of course, a good configuration knowledge, it must allow you to do collaboration outside of Salesforce, so that you might have documentations in Google You might have images on SharePoint. Atlassian is your Jira here. You might have documents in Box. You might have flow charts here using in Lucid Chart. You might have Quip, Jira again, Rally, DevOps tools like GearSet, Copado, Provar. So your configuration knowledge must to be agnostic pretty much and talk to all the other tool sets that you have in there in your org. Almost conclusion here. So this is pretty much the flow that you see. You validate your requirements early on, your requirements, your process maps, your entity relationship diagrams, requirements here, process ERD. You define your work items. That's pretty much, you gather your requirements here, then you define your work items in your user story. So this is very much going to impact your metadata. And then you have to assess the risks. What is going to happen? You know, what's the effect that you have in there? Is something's going to break it or not? So risk assessment is always important to do that. Then you start to, you build, okay? You have your user stories and you start to do your code or declarative, whether it's programmatic or declarative. You do your build, you test again, and you always documenting that. So you're keeping the meta documentation here updated. You keep your metadata analysis in place. And once you have done, you're going to have your solution documentation. So you're going to train users and get feedback. The users say, this is not good. You keep doing here, you know, it's an ongoing situation. So when they approve that, you pretty much, now you get your feedback, you know exactly, have like a lessons learned. So it's very important to keep the cycle here. And this is somebody, a friend that pretty much told me this. You can see the impact the change is going to have before you change it. So it's pretty much when you use configuration knowledge, product methodology or best practices, you can pretty much see right away before you do any changes in your org. You can pretty much have a crystal ball and see into this. If I change this, what's the impact in that? And you can prevent that. Going back to the shift left, early on your process, you do your requirements, you evaluate everything in there. Connect the past to accelerate your future. Salesforce innovation engine is support rapid continuous change. Best run orgs have master configuration knowledge, something that you need to consider. Platform owners should be able to focus on innovation, not securing the past. So looking forward to connect with you folks. I'm always on the social media. This is my email here. And thank you very much. I really appreciate, as I say, I'm very honored to be here on the Pack Dream. I hope you enjoy all the sections. I know that we have several great sections in there, great content, and keep your HANA alive, keep making contributions. Thank you very much.